Hey, Soul Stories fam. We're starting a new love journey. Tell us where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe and join our family. Now stay with us. The story begins. Rain poured down as if the entire sky had been emptied, each drop heavy and cold enough to make the pavement crackle like tiny water fireworks. The storm lashed against Liana's heart so violently that every step she took felt like driving her feet into blocks of ice. She clutched Mia, her 5-year-old daughter trembling in her arms, the child's small hands gripping her collar with the desperate strength of someone who had never seen her mother this terrified before. Blood from the cut on Liana's arm mixed with the rain, forming pale red streaks across skin that had turned ghostly cold. She lost her shoes during the struggle with Travis, her bare feet slapping against the rough pavement, each contact sharp like needles stabbing into her flesh. Her shirt was torn open along her side, exposing bruised skin. On her left cheek, a swelling bruise throbbed hot, even as the rest of her body was freezing. Behind her, Travis's voice tore through the rain, warped, soaked in alcohol and rage. "Liana, you can't run from me. You're mine." Mia whimpered against her neck. "Mommy, he's coming. Mom, I'm scared." Liana tried to steady her breathing, but her lungs felt crushed. All she could do was run down an empty, abandoned-looking road lined with pitch-black warehouses, cold metal walls, shuttered roll-down doors, and not a single lit doorway she could bang on for help. Her heart slammed so violently it felt like it might explode. If she fell, if she slowed even a second, Travis would catch them. A fierce gust of wind hit her, staggering her for a moment, and in that single moment, she saw the first sliver of hope in the darkness. A black car, not the cheap type driven by night shift workers. This was a luxury sedan, its body glossy as a mirror, even as it was hammered by rain. It sat quietly beneath a flickering street lamp, the weak light blinking across the front window. Inside the car, the blue glow of a phone screen illuminated a man's face. Sharp lines, a straight, high nose, neatly styled dark hair, and a tailored charcoal suit resting perfectly on broad shoulders. He was looking down at documents or emails, completely unaware that the world outside his car was shaking because of a desperate woman. Lena had no other choice. Her whole body trembled, from cold, from fear, or from the thin thread of hope sparking in her chest. She stumbled to the car and slapped her bloody hand against the cold window. "Please, please, help us!" Her voice tangled with the rain, cracking under fear and exhaustion. "Please, can we hide in your car? He'll kill us." The man lifted his head, his eyes, deep, dark, commanding, locked onto her face. His gaze swept over everything, the wet hair plastered to her cheeks, the split lip, the bruise, the bleeding arm trembling around a child, and her bare feet shivering in the icy puddles. Then his eyes shifted to Mia, the little girl bearing her face into her mother's neck, tiny shoulders shaking uncontrollably. There were no questions, no hesitation, no demand for explanation. The window lowered a few inches, enough for his voice to come through, low, steady, and unmistakably firm. "Get in." For a second, she thought she misheard. What?" The car doors unlocked with a sharp click. His voice hardened, but carried no coldness. "Get in. Now." At that exact moment, Travis's scream cut through the storm from behind. "Liana!" Liana yanked the door open, almost shoving Mia inside before climbing in after her. The moment the door slammed shut, she heard the locks click again. A solid, certain sound, like an embrace made of steel. And with what little strength she had left, Liana's heart whispered, "We're saved." The car shot through the rain like a black arrow, its engine so quiet that the sound of raindrops hitting the glass was louder than the motor itself. Liana curled up in the back seat, holding Mia tightly as her daughter sobbed in her arms. Her breathing was still uneven, as if her lungs hadn't yet caught up with the truth that they were inside a safe car. The doors were locked, and Travis could no longer touch them. But her body didn't understand that. It still trembled from adrenaline, from fear, from exhaustion. Blood from the wound on her arm continued to drip, mixing with her soaked sleeve, creating a warm, almost contradictory feeling against the freezing bite of the rainy night. Every time Mia cried harder, Liana's chest tightened, guilt and pain coiling through each breath. From the driver's seat, the man kept his eyes forward, his hands steady on the wheel. His posture was straight, shoulders broad, the black shirt he'd soaked through when he opened the car door for them still clinging to his back. Yet he showed no discomfort, no awkwardness. Every movement he made was slow, controlled, unnervingly calm, as if picking up a bleeding woman and a crying child in the middle of a stormy night was something he handled every day. Streetlights reflected across the sharp angles of his face, the cut jawline, the straight nose, the dark eyes holding an entire night sky inside them. Not a single word left his mouth, not one question, not even a hurried breath. Only silence. But it wasn't indifferent silence. It felt like the absolute focus of a man preparing to protect something important. No one spoke until Mia suddenly let out a loud wail, her tiny hands clutching her mother's fingers. Liana tried to soothe her. Shh. Mommy's here, baby. You're okay. You're okay. But her voice trembled as if every word carried a lifetime of fear. The man finally spoke through the rearview mirror, his voice low but unexpectedly gentle. Is she hurt? Liana shook her head slowly, breath still uneven. No, just scared. She's just scared. He gave a small nod, his gaze softening by a fraction when he looked at Mia through the mirror, then sharpening again as he turned back to the road. He tapped a number on the car's built-in screen. Prepare an emergency room, he said simply. The voice on the other end responded with polite, efficient familiarity, as if used to this emotionless style of command. Yes, sir. We'll be ready in 5 minutes. When he ended the call, Liana spoke, her voice so weak it was barely a sound. Where are we going? Somewhere safe, he answered. My facility. A brief silence followed. Mia paused her crying for a moment, pressing her face into her mother's shoulder. Liana tried to study him more closely through the space between the seats. For the first time, she noticed his hand. Large, veined, clean, steady. The watch on his wrist wasn't like anything she'd ever seen. Luxurious, refined, and extremely expensive. Something clicked in her mind. The car, the watch, the way he spoke to the person on the phone, the way he drove, fast, precise, completely unbothered. And then as they passed a massive, glowing billboard in the rain, everything connected. A billboard reading Ridgewell Industries, a familiar logo, a shadowed figure of a man, half his face hidden beneath the dark hair. Liana stopped breathing. She looked at the man in front of her, at the logo on his suit jacket sleeve, made visible by the rain, at the razor-sharp eyes in the rearview mirror, and she realized. Callan Ridgewell, Chief Executive Officer of Ridgewell Industries. The man the media called ruthless, emotionless, a wolf in a suit. She was sitting in Callan Ridgewell's car. Her body tensed instantly. He sensed the change. He didn't look at her, but somehow he felt it. Don't panic, he said softly, almost a whisper. You're safe now. I'll handle this. His voice sounded like reassurance crafted over years. Not sweet, but steady enough to ease her heart just a little. Still, the fear lingered. Not fear of him, but fear that her past would drag this man's entire world into chaos. But she had no time to react. The car turned into a vast complex, security gates opening the moment they approached. Modern buildings, 4 or 5 stories tall, rose behind the gates, white lights glowing through their massive glass panels. The Ridgewell Industries logo stood out in every corner. Callan stopped at a private covered entrance sheltered from the rain. The door opened. 2 medical staff members were already waiting. He stepped out first, opening the back door for them, and for the first time, Liana saw his full height. Tall, solid, as if the storm itself couldn't touch him. Take her to room 3, he ordered, but his voice wasn't harsh. Then he crouched slightly to Mia's level, his tone softening completely. You're okay, sweetheart. Go with your mom. Liana was guided into a clean examination room, the lights gentle, the scent of disinfectant faint but not unpleasant. Dr. Evelyn Shore, her platinum hair neatly tied back and her eyes sharp yet warm, approached. Sit down, honey. Let me take a look at you. Liana sat on the examination bed, Mia on her lap, eyes still swollen. Dr. Shore cleaned the wound, stitched it delicately, and spoke with a calming rhythm. "You're safe now. He can't get in here. Mr. Ridgewell made sure of that." Outside, through the frosted glass divider, Liana saw Callan standing alone in the hallway. Soaked from the rain, his shirt plastered to his back, hands tucked into his pockets, his body tense like a guarded animal. He didn't sit. He didn't walk away. He didn't check his phone. He just stood there, eyes fixed on the door, as if the moment anyone got too close, he would strike. And for the first time that dark night, Liana felt she didn't have to run anymore. The rain was still hammering the pavement like icy nails as Callan drove them away from Ridgewell Industries medical facility. The city sky was a deep blue-black, neon lights flickering and reflecting off smeared streaks of water like thousands of shattered mirrors scattered after a storm. Inside the car, the wipers swept across the windshield in steady intervals, creating a strange rhythm that made the silence feel even heavier. Liana sat in the back seat, holding Mia in her arms. The little girl was exhausted, her head resting on her mother's shoulder, her small hand gripping the hem of Liana's shirt, as if letting go would cause the world to collapse again. Liana pulled a thin blanket around her daughter, her heart tightening every time she looked at that tiny, frightened face. Finally asleep. She still couldn't relax. Her body reacted to every subtle bump in the road. Muscles wound tight like strings ready to snap. The stitches on her arm throbbed each time she held Mia tighter, but she barely felt the pain anymore. There was only one thought left. Travis would find them. He always did. Callan drove in silence. It wasn't the cold, detached silence of powerful men who stood above other people's pain, but a kind of quiet that felt steady. Even without speaking, he created a pocket of safety in the air, as if, as long as his hands stayed on the steering wheel, danger couldn't cross the edge of the road. But Callan couldn't help her without knowing the truth. And Liana understood that. "He's not just angry," she whispered, her voice trembling like a loose thread. "Travis, he's different." Callan didn't turn his head, but his voice was low and steady, giving her space rather than pressure. "Tell me." A heavy drop of rain slammed onto the roof of the car. Liana swallowed hard, staring at her shaking hands in her lap. "He was good at first. He knows how to pretend to be good. The first few months I thought, maybe I'd finally chosen the right person." She gave a short laugh, but it was broken, stripped of any real humor. "Then I got pregnant, and everything changed. He became jealous over nothing, monitored every minute I went anywhere, and called anyone who went anywhere. Every time I pushed back, he apologized, cried, made promises. Then a few weeks later, he'd hit me harder." Callan tightened his grip on the steering wheel, tendons rising along his knuckles, but his voice stayed calm. "And tonight?" Liana drew in a deep breath, the smell of rain and the lingering scent of antiseptic from the hospital gown still clinging to her, making her spine ache. "Tonight, he was drunk. Not the kind of drunk that passes out, the kind that turns him into someone else." She looked down at Mia, brushing her hair gently off her forehead. He grabbed her hand, squeezed so hard Mia screamed. "He's never touched her before. But this time," her voice cracked, "I knew if I didn't run right then, there might never be another chance." A long silence filled the car. Then Liana looked up and caught Callan's eyes in the rearview mirror. There was no pity in them, no judgment, only understanding. Deep, heavy, pressing down on his heart like stone. And more than anything, determination. "Good," Callan said quietly, his voice dropping to steel. "You told me. Now I can fix it." The way he said fix it made Liana freeze. Not arrogant, not empty reassurance, but as if he had just accepted responsibility. Fully, absolutely. When the car stopped in front of Grand Oak Residences, Liana instinctively pulled Mia closer. The luxury building towered above them in the rain, its glass facade reflecting warm golden lights, making it look more like a fortress than a hotel. "We're staying here," she whispered. Callan simply nodded. "Follow me." He carried Mia out of the car first, his movement so gentle that Liana paused in disbelief for a second. She had never seen anyone touch her daughter with such care. Mia nuzzled into the front of Callan's dress shirt, an image Liana never imagined possible. her daughter sleeping peacefully in the arms of a complete stranger, looking safer than she ever had before. Callan opened the door to the suite. Warm light spilled out, wrapping around them like invisible arms. The room was spacious, decorated in soft cream and warm brown tones, the carpet so plush it felt like sinking into clouds. On the kitchen counter was a tray of hot food, chicken soup, hot chocolate, and a bag filled with children's items, pajamas, a stuffed bear, a soft blanket. Liana's heart constricted when she realized he had prepared all of this before they arrived. She turned to Callan. Why? Why would you do all this? For someone you don't know? Callan leaned against the bar counter, hands in his pockets, his black dress shirt still damp from rain, hair slightly stuck to his forehead. But his eyes, deep, steady, unbroken, were fixed on her. Because someone should have helped my mother, he said slowly, each word heavier than the rain outside. No one did. Liana felt the sentence drop inside her like a stone into a deep lake. No loud splash, but ripples spreading endlessly. She wanted to answer, to ask more, but Mia stirred in his arms. The little girl opened her eyes, looked up at him with innocent clarity, and whispered, "Are you a good man?" Callan blinked, his chest rising, then falling, as if the question had struck a place he kept locked away. "I try to be," he said, his voice low and rough with restrained emotion. Mia nodded. "Simple. Trusting." "Okay." Callan looked at Liana again. In his eyes was something she had never seen in any other man. Not the question, "Are you worth helping?" but a silent promise. "I won't let him touch you again." Outside, the rain softened into gentle tapping. The warm light fell across Liana's wet hair, her exhausted but resilient face, and Callan's broad back as he lay Mia down on the small bed. In that warm suite, where there was no yelling, no alcohol, no fists pounding on doors, Liana felt for the first time in months she didn't have to run anymore. "Thank you," she whispered, barely audible, "for everything." Callan gave a small nod. Just one, as if he didn't need gratitude, as if saving the two of them from the storm was simply the only thing he could ever do. And for the first time in a very long time, Liana believed that maybe they truly were safe. The next morning, Liana woke to the gentle sunlight seeping through the thick curtains of the Grand Oak Hotel. It wasn't harsh like the fluorescent lights of the shabby apartment she used to live in, nor did it stir any nightmares from the night she fled. It was soft, warm, as if placing an invisible hand on her shoulder and saying, "Breathe. Today, you're safe." Mia was still curled in her arms, her tiny face marked with dried tear tracks from the night before, but her lips curved in a faint, dreamy smile. Liana brushed a hand through her daughter's hair, fighting the tremble in her breath. Tonight had been the first time in months the two of them had slept through the night without jolting awake to pounding on the door or Travis's drunken footsteps stumbling down the hallway. The quiet sound of footsteps on carpet made Liana look up. Callan stood there, tall, composed, his silver-gray suit crisp as if he had just stepped out of an important meeting. But his eyes lacked the coldness typical of men in high finance. They were warm and attentive in a way Liana never thought she'd see in him. "Morning," he said softly, as if deliberately trying not to wake Mia. "Good morning," Liana replied, her voice small and rough, but no longer trembling the way it had last night. Callan watched her in silence for a few seconds, as though making sure she was truly all right. Then he set a stack of documents on the glass table. "I've arranged a few things," he said in his even tone, though there was caution in his voice, as if he feared she might panic at what was coming. With Callan Ridgewell, a few things was never small. About half an hour later, a lawyer arrived, an older man in a black suit carrying a soft leather briefcase, his presence as sharp as a razor. Callan introduced him, "Alden Pierce, my attorney." Alden gave a courteous bow, then placed the paperwork before Liana. "We'll file a restraining order today. Emergency status. I need your signature here, here, and here." The pen quivered in Liana's hand. Each signature felt like slicing through her past, and at the same time, like cutting the chains she once believed she could never escape. When she finished, she let out a long breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Callan stood beside her, saying nothing. but his presence felt like a shield. No sooner had the lawyer left the suite than the door opened again. Two people stepped in, a broad-shouldered man in a black jacket and a woman with sharp eyes and short, disciplined hair. Leanna instinctively stepped back, tightening her hold on Mia. Callan introduced them with that low, steady voice that made any room feel safer. Ethan Cole, Jade Mercer, they'll protect you and your daughter, 24 hours a day. Jade gave a smile softer than her tough exterior suggested. Don't worry, Liana. We're not following you into the bathroom. But every other moment, we're close. Ethan added, no one gets near you or your daughter without going through us first. Liana felt her eyes sting. Never in her life had anyone stepped up for her in such a direct, practical, unshakable way. So clear and undeniable she couldn't even question it. Before she could fully process it, Callan led them down to the lobby to head somewhere else. Where are we going? She asked, Mia resting her head on her shoulder, sleepy but content. To your new home. The glossy black SUV took them to Ridgewell Residence, a luxurious but understated apartment complex with 24/7 security, keycard access, and facial recognition elevators. Liana nearly choked up when she stepped into the unit designated for her. 2 bedrooms, a modern kitchen, a sunlit living room, and a small balcony overlooking a lush park. Not as extravagant as a penthouse, not as degrading as her old rental, just warm, clean, safe. Mia's room was decorated in soft pink with a teddy bear almost as big as she was. The living room had a sand-colored sofa so soft that sitting on it felt like sinking into a cloud. Liana turned to Callan, her eyes shimmering, not from fear, but from emotion. He leaned lightly against the kitchen bar, hands in his pockets, sunlight catching in his dark hair, softening his usual cold edges. And then he said the words that made her chest tighten. Let me help you. Don't push me away. Not a command, not pity, a request, a quietly masculine plea she had never heard from anyone. Liana couldn't speak, but she didn't reject him either. Callan held her gaze as if reading what she couldn't say. Then he continued, his voice low and sincere enough to make her heart tremble. My outreach division needs someone. It's the department that supports abuse survivors, helps them rebuild their lives. If you want it, the position could be yours. Liana froze in place, stunned. Me? Doing that job? You understand that pain better than anyone, Callan said, and you deserve a chance to move forward. For the first time in years, the feeling inside Liana wasn't darkness or fear, but the fragile beginning of hope taking root. Yes, she whispered, her voice shaky but firm. I want to start over. Callan nodded softly. In that moment, his eyes warmed, gentle, certain, as if he knew their lives had just shifted onto a new path. Mia ran to her mother, wrapping her tiny arms around her legs, giggling when she saw her new room. Mommy! Look! My bed! Liana knelt to hug her daughter, tears spilling down her cheeks. Not the bitter kind from pain, but light, warm, cleansing, like rain rinsing away the past. Callan stood there, hands still in his pockets, his presence steady and silent, like a protective wall. And Liana knew. This moment marked the beginning of a different life, a life where she and Mia could be peaceful, protected, and able to dream about tomorrow. A life Callan Ridgewell, the cold man in the storm that night, had opened for them with the swing of a car door in the middle of a downpour. That evening, when the city lights had fully come alive and Mia had fallen asleep in her little room, Liana stepped into the living room. The soft glow of a small table lamp cast a warm circle over the sand-colored rug. Outside the window, tall buildings reflected the deep violet sky, and the distant hum of traffic sounded like the city's long, tired sigh. Callan was still there. He stood on the balcony, one hand resting on the railing, the other holding a glass of cold water. The glass door reflected 2 versions of him, one real, strong, untouchable, and one warped slightly by the glass, like a fracture no one could see unless they knew how to look deeper. Liana approached quietly, not wanting to intrude, but unable to leave him alone with the weight pressing down on his shoulders. She stopped by the balcony door and spoke in a soft voice. You're still not asleep? Callan turned, his night-dark eyes settling on her face. I don't sleep easily. She stepped onto the balcony, her hand instinctively holding her arm where the stitches still ached, the night breeze lifting strands of her hair. Thank you. For everything. Callan was silent for a moment before setting his glass down on the small balcony table. He didn't look directly at her, but his voice reached somewhere far beyond the present, far deeper than she expected. You asked why I did all of this for you and your daughter. He paused. You deserve a clearer answer. The air around them seemed to settle. The whole city went quiet, leaving only the sound of Liana's heartbeat pounding with a strange intuition. Callan Ridgewell was about to open a door no one had ever been allowed to step through. Callan, Liana, he interrupted gently, not cold, but with a rare sincerity in his voice. You deserve to know. He placed both hands on the railing and leaned forward slightly. In the night, his silhouette looked steady, and so profoundly alone that Liana's chest tightened. My father was a violent man. The words fell into the space between them like shards of glass hitting the floor. He wasn't drunk. He wasn't out of control. He hit because he liked the feeling of power. Liana felt the air thicken in front of her chest. She didn't speak, didn't comfort him. She simply stood beside him, close enough that he would know he wasn't alone. Callan continued, his voice steady but heavy with the weight of someone who had carried pain far too long. My mother, she was the one he targeted the most. I heard her crying throughout my whole childhood. The beginning, the crashes, and every time I ran toward her, she'd pull me into a closet and say, Callan, stay here. Don't let him see you. Liana lifted a hand to her mouth. Tears spilled before she realized it. Not because the story was tragic, but because of the way Callan said it. So calm, too calm. The kind of calm a person learns only when they've had to shut down their emotions just to survive. One night, he gripped the railing so tightly his knuckles turned white. He hit her longer than usual. I heard every sound. I knew something was wrong. I ran out before she could hide me. Callan stared out at the city, at the glowing towers that now stood as silent witnesses to his past. She fell to the floor, and she never got up again. The street below faded away. The city lights stopped shimmering. For that moment, there were only two hearts, one carrying an old wound, the other recognizing and understanding it completely. I couldn't save my mother. His voice sank lower, softer, but sharp enough to cut through his own heart. I wasn't strong enough, not old enough, not enough of anything. Liana couldn't bear it anymore. She stepped closer and placed a gentle hand on his arm. So light, as if afraid to hurt him more. But Callan didn't move away. He only closed his eyes for a single second, as if her warmth had touched the place where he kept that deepest, oldest wound. I swore one day I'd become someone powerful enough that no one could ever treat women and children the way he treated my mother. Callan opened his eyes. His gaze was sharp, but full of pain. I built Ridgewell Industries because of that. Not for status, not for wealth, but so I would have enough power to stop men like Travis. The name settled between them. Heavy, painful, but true. Callan was right. He needed to know everything in order to protect them. Liana couldn't hold back anymore. Tears streamed down her cheeks, hot, quiet. Not pity, but something purer, deeper. So deep it made her hands shake. Callan. She said his name like a soft, healing promise. You weren't wrong. You didn't abandon your mother. You were a child. There was nothing more you could have done. Callan turned toward her, his eyes darkening, a mixture of hurt and tenderness blending into one expression. But now, he said softly, I can do something. For you. For Mia. For people like my mother. Liana broke completely, not from weakness, but from being seen. She understood him. He understood her. Two wounds, different stories, but mirrored like reflections. She lifted her hand and touched his face, her fingertips trembling against the strong line of his jaw. Callan didn't pull away. He stayed exactly where he was, letting her see him, feel him, believe him. In that moment, something softened between them. Not love, not yet, but a thread. thin, warm, quiet, linking two hearts that once believed they had frozen solid, a beginning so small, but enough to change everything that would come after. The days that followed moved in a rhythm Liana never believed she could live again. A rhythm peaceful, gentle, warm enough that everything it touched felt like softened sunlight. It all began with the smallest things. In the morning, when Liana was getting Mia ready for daycare, Callan was already waiting in the hallway. Sleeves rolled up, tie loosened, a cup of coffee in one hand and a newspaper in the other, as if he had stepped out of a movie but was somehow on his way to becoming a real person. "Let's go," he said simply, holding the elevator door for the two of them, his large hand covering the top so Mia wouldn't bump her head. Nothing grand, nothing dramatic, but enough to make Liana's heart flutter in ways she didn't want to acknowledge. Callan drove them to the center, then headed to the office. In the afternoon, he came back to pick them up. He never let them walk around the complex alone, never left them waiting outside. Callan Ridgewell, the powerful man the entire city believed to be cold, appeared in front of them every day like a member of a family no one dared to give a name. In the evenings, usually when Liana was busy cooking dinner and Mia was being her chaotic little self, Callan somehow slipped into their routine without anyone officially inviting him. The first time he came by, Liana assumed he was just checking on security, but when he quietly removed his suit jacket, hung it on a chair and asked, "Do you have a bigger pot? This one's not enough for the pasta." She realized she had been wrong. Callan cooked extremely well, the kind of well that made Liana stand still for a moment, not because of the skill itself, but because the sight of him was so different from everything people said about him, the ruthless billionaire who probably couldn't fry an egg. Yet there he was, stirring a pan, basil scent filling the kitchen, warm yellow light falling over the cool metal of his watch, everything softening around the way he moved. Mia tugged on the hem of his shirt. "Callan, I want lots and lots of cheese." He put down the spoon and crouched to her level. "Only if you promise to finish your dinner." Mia nodded so hard her ponytail bounced. "I promise." Callan smiled. Rare, gentle, brief, but warm enough to brighten the entire kitchen. And Liana, standing by the sink, felt her heart tilt just a little. On other days, Callan didn't cook. Instead, he fixed things. Flickering kitchen light? He brought a ladder. Burnt-out bulb. He replaced it on the spot. Loose door handle? He tightened it with tools from his car. The bookshelf Mia knocked over? He rebuilt it, leveled it, wiped it clean. He didn't do these things to show off, not to earn points. It was as if his body reacted on instinct. See something broken, fix it. See someone vulnerable, protect them. Liana didn't know what made him this way, but every time she watched him working on something, sleeves rolled up, revealing strong, veined forearms, she felt something inside her glow faintly. Not a blazing flame, just a slow ember spreading quietly. On Sunday evening, Mia ran into the living room with a princess comic book in her hands. "Callan, read it!" He was checking his emails but immediately closed the laptop. "Again?" "Yes!" Mia shouted. "Okay," he said, settling onto the sofa. Mia climbed into his lap as if she had been doing it her whole life. Callan opened the first page. His voice was deep, steady, reading the words slowly. His storytelling absolutely did not match the tone of a fairy tale, but the mismatch was exactly what made it adorable enough that Liana had to cover her mouth to keep from laughing. She leaned against the kitchen doorway, watching a sight so strange and beautiful it made her nose burn. A man who once watched his mother collapse in blood, now reading a princess comic to a child as though it were the most sacred thing in the world. And Mia loved him in an instinctive, innocent, immediate way. One night, when Callan came home late, she asked, "Mommy, does Callan live here?" "No, sweetheart." "Then why do I think I want him to live here?" The question made Liana's heart skip, not because of its dangerous implications, but because it reflected a truth she had been avoiding. Callan had become someone. On Friday afternoon, Nora, Liana's only close friend, came to visit. Nora was the kind of woman who always told the truth, bluntly, but without ever hurting anyone, because her heart was golden. They were in the kitchen preparing tea while Callan was in the living room fixing a stuck light switch. Nora glanced through the doorway, then turned to Liana with a knowing look. "Liana," she said quietly, "good men don't hide. They want you to see everything they're proud of." Liana frowned. "What do you mean?" Nora sipped her tea, tilting her head. "I mean, that man, Callan, he's not showing off, but he is spending his time fixing your door, reading to your kid, cooking like this is his home." Nora's eyes softened. "Men like that aren't careless. They're trying, Liana, trying to hide how they feel." The words sank into Liana's heart like a small arrow. Not painful, just enough to make her heartbeat stumble. She looked at Callan. He was standing on a small step stool, arms lifted to adjust a wire. The overhead light cast a glow across his face. Serious, focused, yet softened by the way Mia ran around his legs like a kitten. And Liana knew Nora was right. Callan wasn't cold. He was guarded. The way people who have endured deep wounds often are. But day by day, through every small action, every dinner, every quiet glance, those walls were cracking. Neither of them said a word. Neither admitted anything. But between the evening meals, the fairy tale stories, the times he carried heavy bags for her, the way he parked right at the entrance so she and Mia never had to walk in the rain, something had begun, slow, warm, smoldering like glowing embers beneath ash. And they both knew it, even if neither was brave enough to touch it yet. That evening, the apartment at Ridgewell Residence was so peaceful that Liana almost believed the past had finally fallen away. The kitchen carried a faint lavender scent. Warm golden light softened every corner of the home, and Mia sat on the rug building tiny Lego shapes with her little hands, humming a children's tune she only sang when she felt completely safe. Liana washed the dishes, her hands brushing warm water as a thin, fragile sense of happiness spread with each breath. She knew she wasn't fully healed yet, but at least these days she no longer jolted awake at night to strange noises. Then her phone lit up. An unknown number. No name, no caller ID, nothing except a string of meaningless digits. She froze, her stomach twisted, her throat dried in a single heartbeat. She didn't want to answer, didn't want to reopen the nightmare. But the phone buzzed again, this time longer, more insistent, like an invisible hand forcing the past back into her chest. She answered without thinking. "Hello?" 2 full seconds of silence. 2 seconds were enough for fear to tear straight through her skin. Then a voice she thought she would never have to hear again spoke. Low, raspy, dragging like old scars reopening. "Nice building, sweetheart." Liana went cold. No, no, this was impossible. And the restraining order was already in place. He wasn't allowed near her. He wasn't allowed to call. He wasn't allowed to threaten. But the law couldn't stop him from finding loopholes. Travis's voice continued, each word biting into her ear. "Ridgewell Residence, 12th floor, cream-colored door, hallway lights a little dim." Liana grabbed the edge of the counter to keep from collapsing. The room spun. He wasn't here, but he knew too much. "And Mia, little princess, cute backpack, pink, rabbits on it." Her heart dropped, as if someone had squeezed it hard enough to stop the beating entirely. Mia looked up at her mother, her big round eyes widening with worry as she noticed Liana's trembling lips. Travis lowered his voice, whispering like a threat through a nighttime door crack. "You think that billionaire can hide you? He can't. I know your schedule. I know where Mia goes to school. You can't run from me." Liana screamed, not from fear, but to cut off the poison in his voice. She hung up and dropped the phone to the floor. "Honey? Mommy?" Mia ran to her, panicked. Liana knelt and wrapped her arms around her daughter, holding her so tightly she shook, sobbing as if the whole world was breaking inside her. She reached for the phone again, though her hands were shaking so violently the screen blurred. She called Callan. He picked up instantly. Not even a second ring. "Liana?" "Callan." Her voice cracked, fragmented. "He called me. From a private number. He knows the building, the school, Mia's backpack, everything." Callan was silent for one beat before his voice dropped. Steel striking stone. "Don't move. I'm on my way." Callan, he violated the order. Can they arrest him? Can they? Liana, he said slowly, firmly, holding her together from miles away with only his voice. We need to verify the number. It was anonymous. The police can't arrest someone from a voice alone. But I'll handle this. Stay where you are. She heard heavy footsteps over the phone. He was running. Less than 10 minutes later, the apartment door beeped and swung open. Ethan and Jade entered first, checking the space for safety. Callan came in after them. He didn't speak. He simply went straight to her, kneeling in front of where she clutched Mia on the sofa, her eyes red, her breath sharp and frantic. He placed one large hand on her shoulder, not pulling, not forcing, just letting her feel that he was there. Give her to me, he said softly but firmly. Liana placed Mia into his arms as if handing over the entire world she was barely holding together, with shaking fingers. Callan held Mia and soothed the crying child. Then he turned back to Liana. Did you record the call? He asked. She shook her head, sobbing. I couldn't think. It's okay, Callan said without a trace of blame in his voice. He used a burner phone. It can't be traced immediately. But we'll report it, and the police will open a case. This is evidence, and it will matter. He helped her stand and guided her gently to the couch, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders as if trying to hold her warmth together before it slipped away. Ethan called the police immediately. 2 officers arrived, opened a report, and took down every detail Liana could recount. They said, we acknowledge this is a violation of the restraining order. We will investigate. But because he used an anonymous number, we can't make an arrest yet. Lena felt a small spark of hope inside her die again. Callan placed his hand on top of hers, grounding her. When the police left, the apartment went quiet, but not peaceful. It was the tense silence of a string pulled tight before a storm. Mia had fallen asleep in Jade's arms. Liana sat next to Callan on the sofa, her fingers entwined with his, as if letting go meant falling into a bottomless pit. Why does he keep doing this? She whispered. Callan tilted his head, looking at her with an ache that wasn't even for himself. Because men like him don't want love. They want control. And when they lose control, they turn to whatever weapon they have left. Liana shuddered. Then what does he have left now? Callan tightened his fingers around hers. Legal weapons. He said those 2 words with a mix of fury and worry, as if he already saw what was coming. He'll try to use the court against you. He can't come near you. He can't touch you. But he'll try to attack the thing you love most. Liana's breath hitched, her eyes widening with terror. You mean Mia? Callan nodded, very slowly. Liana, I won't let that happen. But we have to prepare. A custody battle is coming. Her whole body trembled, not because of Travis, but because it felt like she was about to lose the one thing she lived for. Callan pulled her into his arms, holding her like he was holding her soul together. I'm here, he whispered. I'm not leaving. Not tonight, not ever. And in his arms, Liana knew. Tonight was only the beginning of the biggest battle of her life, a battle she would no longer have to face alone. Night fell over the Ridgewell residence with a strange kind of silence. Not the peaceful, gentle quiet Liana had found in the past few weeks, but the kind that feels like the calm surface of a lake before a storm breaks, when everything underneath churns and coils, waiting for the moment it spills over. After the police left, after the report was filed, after Mia was put to sleep by Jade in her room, the large apartment held only 3 beings, Liana, Callan, and a fear that hadn't yet found its name, hovering in the air. Callan stood by the large window, his silhouette cutting into the city lights like a sharp line drawn across the soft gold. His arms were folded, silent, but not with indifference. It was the silence of a man restraining himself from storming outside to hunt Travis down, even though he knew that doing so would ruin every legal strategy meant to protect Liana and Mia. Liana sat on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket, but trembling nonstop. For the first time in weeks of safety, she felt dragged back into who she used to be, terrified, fragile, as if the slightest touch would shatter her. Callan turned and looked at her. Even from several feet away, the force of his gaze hit her so strongly she had to look away, afraid that if she held it even a second longer, she'd break into tears again. But Callan didn't let her hide. He walked over and sat down beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him, yet far enough that she wouldn't feel pressured or forced to speak. "Liana," he said softly, his voice lowered as if shaped to fit the trembling heart in her hands. "He won't get anywhere near you. Not with my security team. Not with the police watching him. You're safe here." She shook her head, eyes wet. "How can you be sure?" she whispered. "He knows everything. I thought he was gone from my life. But today—" Her voice broke like a crushed piece of paper. Callan took her hand, gently but firmly. "Liana," he continued, "what he did was cowardly. He attacked from a distance to avoid the restraining order. But he can't touch you anymore. Not ever. I won't let that happen." She looked down at their joined hands. His hand was warm and wide, enveloping hers completely, as if he were using his own body heat to pull her back into the present, instead of letting her fall into old, painful memories. For a long moment, Liana said nothing. She just breathed, short, thin, fragile breaths that made Callan lift her hand and place it against his chest. "Feel this." He guided her palm to where his heart was beating. Steady, strong, unshaken. "You're safe," he said, each word hitting straight into her chest. "As long as I'm breathing, you are safe." Her heart tightened, not from fear, but from a sense of protection so intense she had never felt anything like it. She inhaled deeply, fighting back the terror. Then she asked the question she had been holding back for a long time. "Why?" She looked into his eyes. "Why do you care so much? Why haven't you walked away when you don't owe me or my daughter anything?" Callan froze, not because of the question, but because of the hurt in her voice, like she didn't believe she deserved to have anyone stand on her side. He lifted his other hand to her cheek, gently forcing her to meet his eyes. "Liana," he said, his voice low, like a confession that had been restrained for too long. "From the moment I saw you on that street, terrified, bleeding, protecting your daughter with everything you had, I—" He swallowed, eyes closing slightly as if opening a door that had been locked for years. "I couldn't walk away." The room went completely silent. Only the soft rain tapping against the window and the uneven beating of her heart filled the space. Callan continued, voice deeper, more honest, stripped of all defenses. "It stopped being about protecting a stranger, Liana. You and Mia, you matter to me, more than I expected, more than I wanted, but it's too late to pretend otherwise." Liana's breath hitched. Her heart slammed against her ribs as if trying to break free. She didn't know what to say, didn't know what to do. She only knew that Callan's eyes, usually cold, deep, unreadable, were now so full of emotion she could barely look at him without feeling herself melt into them. "Callan?" She whispered only his name. He waited, no pressure, no leaning in, just waiting. Liana raised her hand lightly, so gently it felt like the brush of a petal, and touched his face. Callan leaned slightly into her palm, a tiny movement that made her want to cry from the unnamed softness of it. She whispered, voice shaking, "I feel the same." Callan closed his eyes for a split second, as if those words pierced through every wall he had built around his heart. When he opened them again, his gaze was warmer, softer, so sincere it nearly broke her. He pressed his forehead lightly against hers. Not a kiss, but not something friends would do either. A distance where their hearts touched, even if their lips hadn't. "Liana," he murmured, "we'll get through this. Together?" She exhaled, long and trembling, leaning her forehead against his a little more, seeking a place to rest. And in that moment, in the midst of danger, fear, and the shadows still chasing them, something new began to form. Not a promise, not a vow, not a blazing love, but trust. Something Liana once believed she would never find again. The morning began with the most soulless sound Liana had ever heard in her life. The knock of a delivery worker bringing a thick, stiff envelope sealed with the dark blue emblem of the county court. A single soft thud on the floor was enough to make her heart drop to the bottom of her chest. Mia was eating cereal in the kitchen, her legs swinging from the high chair, her small ponytail tied slightly crooked. The cheerful air of breakfast suddenly felt crushed by an invisible hand. Liana picked up the envelope, but her hands shook so badly she had to use both just to hold it. On the upper left corner, stamped clearly, Superior Court of Seattle, Family Division, petition for custody, petitioner Travis Hale. The entire world spun. She had to brace herself against the wall just to stay upright, feeling as if someone had poured ice water down her spine. No, no, this couldn't be happening. Travis didn't care about Mia. Travis had never wanted to be a father. Travis only wanted control. He only wanted to hurt her. He wanted to reclaim the power he believed was his. But the document in her hand, certified by the American legal system, said the opposite. It said he was demanding full custody. It said he accused her of being unstable, emotionally unfit, and financially dependent on a stranger. It said he wanted Mia. Liana's breath shortened, her whole body trembling as if drained of blood. Mia lifted her head, big innocent eyes watching her mother. "Mommy, are you okay?" Just fine." Liana forced a smile, but her lips felt frozen solid. She crouched and gathered her daughter into her arms, holding her so tightly she feared if she loosened even half a second, Mia would be ripped from her and disappear forever. She called Callan immediately, not because he was the only one she trusted now, but because he was the only person she knew who would run to her, no matter where he was, no matter who he was meeting. The phone rang only once. "Liana?" His voice was sharp like a blade, yet warm like a place to return to. "Callan," her voice broke, strangled. "He's trying to take Mia. He's trying to take my baby." Half a minute later, she heard a chair shoved back, papers scattering to the floor, a door slammed with force, then hurried footsteps echoed through the phone. "I'm coming. Don't move. Don't talk to anyone. I'll be there in 15. He hung up before she could answer. Liana stood there holding Mia, unable to breathe. The once safe Ridgewell residence apartment felt like it was shrinking, the walls closing in, the floor tilting beneath her. Callan arrived 13 minutes later. He didn't knock. He entered the security code and rushed inside. His eyes found her before anything else, as if instinct alone led him straight to her. When he saw her sitting on the floor, holding Mia, her face pale, her shoulders shaking, Callan froze. In his eyes was a mix of explosive fury and a quiet ache he couldn't name. "Give her to me." His voice wasn't loud but powerful enough that Liana obeyed instantly. He lifted Mia, patting her gently as she buried her face in his chest, sensing her mother's fear without understanding why. Callan sat down beside Liana, still holding Mia in one arm, while his other hand cupped Liana's cheek, urging her to meet his eyes. "Liana, listen to me." His breath brushed against her, warm and steady, an anchor in the storm. "He cannot take her. He will not take her. Not while I'm breathing." Liana tore open the court envelope with trembling hands. Callan took it from her, scanning it with the speed of someone accustomed to handling crises. But when he reached the part accusing her of being emotionally unstable, his jaw locked as if it might crack. "His attorney filed a petition for an emergency custody hearing." His voice faltered. "Emergency?" Liana whispered, her lips drained of color. Callan nodded slowly. "The court could schedule it within 72 hours. She felt herself collapsing again, but Callan gripped her shoulders, refusing to let her fall. "Liana, look at me." She lifted her tear-filled eyes. "I won't let him win. This is a legal battle, and legal battles are exactly where I'm strongest." In the next 10 minutes, the apartment transformed into a command center. Callan called a specialized legal team for domestic violence and custody cases. He ordered Ethan and Jade to escalate security, guarding both the building and Mia's school. He had Dr. Evelyn forward every medical record of Liana's injuries. He summoned a retrieval team to gather traffic camera footage from the night she escaped. And every time Liana's vision blurred with despair, he placed his hand on her back and murmured, "You are the safest woman in this city right now. I promise you that." By the afternoon, Callan's legal team arrived. They opened the thick case file and spoke to Liana with calm, professional, but deeply empathetic voices. "We've reviewed everything. We have strong advantages." Advantages?" Liana choked. "He can take my daughter with just that paper?" "No, the attorney said firmly. He cannot. In modern U.S. family courts, the primary caregiver is always prioritized. And that's you, not Travis, Callan added, his voice dropping into steel. And we have evidence. A lot of it. They listed it. Photographs of injuries. Medical reports from Dr. Evelyn. Security team statements. Travis's history of violence. The threatening call. Elevator camera footage of her panic. Proof of his unemployment and alcoholism. Documentation of child endangerment for squeezing Mia's hand. Liana covered her face, overwhelmed by shame and pain, not because her life was exposed, but because she had to relive it all. Callan gently placed his... 3 days later, the preliminary hearing began. A small, cold courtroom, harsh white lights, stiff wooden benches. Liana sat between Callan and her attorney, her hands twisted so tightly her knuckles turned white. Travis walked in, clean clothes, neatly styled hair, wearing a smug smile. He looked like the perfect father on a magazine cover. But Liana knew the truth. He was a poisonous storm. His eyes slid toward her, then toward Mia, waiting in the adjoining room with a social worker. His smile curled. The smile of a man who believed he had already won. Callan saw it before Liana even reacted. He held her hand tightly, squeezing until her skin warmed again. "I'm right here. He can't touch you ever again." The hearing was suffocating. Travis lied smoothly. His lawyer spun a story like a movie script. Liana was unstable. Liana lived off a wealthy stranger. Liana had alienated Mia from her father. Then Callan's legal team stood. Within 15 minutes, they dismantled the entire narrative. Injury photos, medical documentation, the threatening call recording, witness statements, police reports, video of Travis pounding on her old apartment door, alcohol and violence reports. Travis began sweating. His voice cracked. His expression shifted from smugness to anger, then to fear. Finally, the judge delivered the ruling. Temporary full custody remains with the mother, Liana Hale. The father, Travis Hale, is granted supervised visitation only under the supervision of a licensed social worker. He is prohibited from approaching the mother or child outside court-approved meetings. Liana broke down in tears, not from pain, but from relief. Callan placed a hand on her back and whispered, "I told you, you'd win. And we'll keep winning, until he can never hurt either of you again." And in that moment, in the cold courtroom, with pens scratching and the gavel's echo bouncing off brick walls, Liana knew. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time in her life, she wasn't fighting alone. The first morning after the trial, soft sunlight poured through the windows of the Ridgewell residence apartment, no longer muted by fear, no longer dimmed by threatening phone calls, but a warm golden light, gentle and pure, like the kind painted in oil landscapes depicting peaceful days that exist only in imagination. Liana stood beside the sink, hands wrapped around a cup of hot coffee, and for the first time in months, she wasn't drinking it while glancing toward the door, wasn't listening for footsteps in the hallway, wasn't wondering if someone was watching her. The apartment was quiet in the most pleasant way. The silence of a home, not the silence of fear. Mia was running circles around the living room, hugging the new teddy bear Callan had given her after the trial, her tiny ponytail bouncing like a strand of sunlight. Every now and then, she paused, looked at her mother and giggled. That light, airy laugh felt like layers of cotton gently placed over Liana's heart, making it warm and full again. "Mommy, can we draw later?" Mia chirped. "Of course, sweetheart," Liana answered, for the first time not having to stop mid-sentence to breathe through anxiety. A new life opened like that, not through some grand event, but through dozens of small, ordinary, precious things that almost brought her to tears simply because they felt like living. A week later, Liana received the official notice from Ridgewell Outreach's HR. She was being promoted to assistant coordinator after only a few weeks on the job. Evelyn hugged her tightly right there in the office, telling her, "You've earned this," while Nora sent a nearly 1-minute voice note screaming with joy. Liana stood by the 18th floor window, watching the city stretch far below, and for the first time, she didn't feel small in such a vast landscape. She felt strong, She felt enough. She felt herself rebuilding her life with hands that still trembled, but held on with determination. Callan started appearing more often. At first once a week, usually Sunday evenings, bringing Mia's favorite pasta since she eats better when Callan is here, according to Mia's very serious statement. Then twice a week, then three. And one evening, Ethan accidentally revealed, "We kind of consider this place the boss's second home now." Callan flicked the edge of a file against Ethan's head, but his eyes revealed something close to acknowledgement. No one said it out loud, but all three understood. Callan belonged in this apartment, with Mia's love for hot chocolate, with the kitchen full of her laughter, with the way Liana's eyes brightened when she opened the door to find him there. One Friday evening, the Seattle sky was dyed a deep twilight purple, while the apartment glowed with warm yellow light like an old bookstore. Callan was chopping vegetables in the kitchen, shirt sleeves rolled to the elbows, revealing strong forearms. Mia was coloring at the table. Liana sat by the window with her tea, watching them like a scene from a film she never imagined she'd star in. She didn't realize how beautiful the moment was until Callan looked up, caught her gaze, and gave her a smile so small it was barely the shift of a corner of his mouth. Yet it was enough to make her heart jump. Dinner unfolded with laughter, the smell of tomato sauce, and Mia proudly showing each drawing as if Callan were the only audience that mattered on earth. When Mia went to bed, Callan washed the dishes while Liana stood beside him, drying each plate. They worked together naturally, like two people who had lived together for years. No awkwardness, no effort, no pretending, just presence. And in that moment, between the clinking of dishes and the steam rising against the stove's glass, Liana felt her heart settle into a kind of calm she didn't recognize at first. It wasn't tangled like before. It wasn't tightened by fear. It opened, light and certain, as if it finally understood where it wanted to go. "Callan?" she said softly, yet clearly. He turned. "Hmm?" She set the dish towel down and faced him fully. In the warm kitchen light, her eyes glowed. Not from brightness alone, but from something deeper, warmer, like a door inside her had just been unlocked. "I think," she inhaled, "I think I'm ready." Callan tilted his head slightly, his expression softening like ocean waves at sunset. "Ready for what?" She smiled, small but real. "For us." For a second, Callan froze, completely, as if every cell in his body stopped moving to make sure she had truly said those words. Then slowly, his eyes softened so much that Liana felt herself melting into them. "Liana," his voice dropped, rough with relief, joy, and something faintly trembling. "I've been ready since the night you knocked on my window." Those simple words, beautiful in their quiet honesty, made her chest tighten. Callan stepped closer, close enough that their breaths mingled, close enough that he could lift a hand to her cheek and brush away a loose strand of hair. "Are you sure?" he asked, whispering like he was touching her heart. "I don't want you to feel rushed, or pressured, or—" She placed a finger gently on his lips, stopping him. "I'm sure." And so, with a movement slow, very slow, like he was afraid of breaking something precious, Callan leaned down. His lips touched hers, soft as air, warm as a promise, deep enough that every old wound inside her seemed to dissolve into dust. It wasn't a kiss born of impulse, not a kiss of possession. It was the kiss of two hearts that had lived too long in fear, finally allowed to love. When they parted, Callan rested his forehead against hers, smiling into the quiet. "Welcome to the rest of our story." And Liana knew, from that moment on, life wasn't just safe. It was beautiful and open, and filled with the love she once believed she would never touch again. That weekend afternoon, the Seattle sky was unusually clear, sunlight tilting softly across the rain-washed streets like thousands of golden shards of glass. Callan slowed the car as he approached Ridgewell Heights, the skyscraper he had lived in for years, a grand, luxurious place that had never truly been home until he brought Liana and Mia to its front entrance. "Mia," Callan said, his voice warm like hot chocolate, "are you ready to see where I live?" The little girl nodded so hard her tiny ponytail bounced like a bird's wing. Liana smiled, holding Mia's hand as all three stepped into the private elevator that went straight to the 60th floor, the penthouse level. Her heart beat faster, not from fear, but from the strange, tender feeling of being invited into a man's private world, a world he wanted her to belong to. The doors opened, and both mother and daughter froze. Callan's penthouse was unlike anything Liana had ever seen. High ceilings, floor-to-ceiling, glass windows revealing the entire city spread out beneath them like a river of starlight. Minimalist, elegant interiors of warm wood and polished steel. Not cold as she had imagined, but radiating a quiet peace, the lived-in space of a man she was beginning to understand more deeply each day. Mia ran into the center of the room, raising her arms toward the sky. "It looks like the sky lives inside your house." Callan laughed. The rare kind of laugh Liana always found so beautiful it made her chest tighten. Then Mia stopped, turned, and looked at him with the serious expression only a 6-year-old can have when saying something that matters more than anything. "Callan?" "Yeah, sweetheart." "Can you?" She hesitated. "Can you be my dad someday?" Silence fell so completely that Liana could hear the wind brushing against the windows. Callan froze, breath trapped for several seconds. His eyes glistened in a way she had never seen in such a strong man, as if a locked door deep inside him had just been opened by a tiny hand. He knelt down, placing both hands on Mia's small shoulders. "Mia," he said, voice thick, "I would be the luckiest man in the world if I ever get to be your dad." Mia smiled and wrapped her arms around his neck. Callan held her the way a man holds a piece of his heart he never knew he was missing. Liana turned her face away for a moment, hands covering her mouth, because her heart felt as if it were dissolving into soft, glowing light. 2 weeks later, moving in happened so naturally that none of them had to discuss it. One evening, when Callan brought dinner to their old apartment, he said quietly, "You know you can stay with me, both of you, for as long as you want." And Liana realized she wasn't afraid, not anxious, not uncertain. She nodded. Mia danced on her chair, and just like something written long before they ever met, the two of them moved into Callan's penthouse. Not as a rushed decision, but as the result of months of being loved in actions, not promises. During the very first week, Callan submitted documents to the family court, petitioned to legally adopt Mia Ridgewell Hale. When he handed Liana the paperwork, his hand trembled. Not out of fear, but hope. "If you let me," he said, voice low and honest, "I want to be her father in every way, not just in her heart, but in the eyes of the law, and yours." Liana looked at him for a long time, long enough for all the old wounds inside her eyes to seem to fall away and fade. Callan didn't just love her. He loved the most vulnerable part of her. He loved Mia. He loved this family. And in that moment, Liana knew. Her love for Callan was no longer something blooming. It was something rooted deep, steady, and strong enough to withstand any storm. One weekend evening, Callan took Liana to dinner at a restaurant on the highest floor in the city. The windows opened to a violet-orange sunset painted like a honey-tinted watercolor. They sat beside each other instead of across from each other, wine glowing under warm lights. When dessert arrived, Callan placed a black velvet box on the table. Not too big, not too small. Not the classic engagement box everyone recognizes. But when he opened it, the ring inside made Liana forget how to breathe. It wasn't an engagement ring. It was the ring he wanted her to see first. "One day," Callan said softly, "if I propose, would you say yes?" Liana didn't look at the ring. She looked at him, and her heart, once too afraid to trust happiness, now overflowed with certainty. "Yes," she said, her voice soft but steady. "Every single time." Callan smiled, the biggest, purest, most genuine smile she had ever seen on him. He lifted her hand and kissed the back of it. "Then I don't want to wait." He stood, pulled his chair back gently, knelt beside the table, framed by the sunset and the breathing of the city below. "Mia already asked me to be her dad," he said, eyes glowing with something powerful and deep. "And now, I want to ask the woman who saved both of us." He looked into her eyes, the eyes he had loved since the night she knocked on his car window in the storm. "Liana Hart, will you marry me?" Liana covered her mouth, tears spilling, not from fear, but from finally receiving a kind of love she had never believed was meant for her. Callan, her voice cracked. Yes, yes, I will. Applause erupted from nearby tables. And then, Mia ran out from her hiding spot because Callan had asked the restaurant staff to bring her in at the perfect moment. Mia, Callan said, still kneeling, turning toward her. Can I be your dad for real? She nodded hard, wrapping her arms around him. You already are. The wedding was small, held in the rooftop garden of the penthouse. White flowers, golden candles, soft music, close friends. Nora cried through the entire ceremony, and Mia tossed petals like a tiny angel. As the sun set behind Seattle's skyline, Liana leaned against Callan's chest, her wedding dress soft as a breath. You saved me that night, she whispered. Callan lowered his head, pressing a kiss to her forehead. The kiss of a man who had finally found home. No, he murmured. We saved each other. And under the last golden glow of the sky, their family, three once broken hearts, began a new life, whole and peaceful, as if